Hello and welcome to our webinar today. This is Chris French with CPF, and we'll be starting in about 10 minutes. So this is a good time to enjoy our pre-roll, including information about our auction and our latest diversity scholarship winner. We'll be starting in 9 minutes. Hello and welcome to our webinar today on sacred spaces. This is Chris with CPF and we'll be starting in about 8 minutes. It's a good time just to enjoy our pre-roll, which we're showing some thank you to our sponsors, information about our annual auction, and of course, everything we do is possible because of you. So visit our website, californiapreservation.org. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar for today. This is part 2 of our 4-part holiday series. Just sit back and enjoy this little pre-roll that we're showing. Right now, you can see that catch the recording on Facebook or YouTube of our program from the other day, the Playground Battle. And also be sure to check out our auction for any gift ideas. Everything is at californiapreservation.org. And we'll be starting in 7 minutes. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining our webinar today. We'll be starting in about 6 minutes. This is Chris with CPF. I wanted to encourage all of you to donate if possible at californiapreservation.org and enjoy this little pre-roll that we've put together showing that showing and thanking our members and donors from across the country and around the globe. We'll be starting in 5 minutes. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today. This is Chris with CPF. We'll be starting the webinar in 4 minutes. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar. I wanted to thank you again and again for joining us today and encourage you all to register for our 4-part series. This is part 2. We still have some really fun stuff coming up in December, including a gingerbread contest. You can go to our website at californiapreservation.org and send us a picture of your gingerbread house, whatever you think is your best creation. And we are actually going to be awarding the winner a copy of a gingerbread book. And that will be at our evening event. And that will start at 5:30. Check our website for the date. It's californiapreservation.org. We'll be starting the webinar in 2 minutes. Welcome, everybody. We will be starting the webinar in 1 minute. Hey, everyone. This is Chris Madrid French with California Preservation Foundation. I know John is in here somewhere. Here he is. Welcome, John. How are you today?
Great. How are you? I'm looking forward to today's program.
Yeah, me too. So I just wanted to welcome everyone to our program today and encourage you to visit our website at californiapreservation.org. We have a ton of good programs coming up this month. I'll just tell you, December 7th, we're having a program about skiing. Is that right, John?
Yes. What is it?
Hitting the slopes. That's what it's called. We're going to hit the slopes on December 7th. And then December 14th is going to be gingerbread contest time. It'll be one of our extra super fun evening events starting at 5:30. And John has just put in the chat how to bid at our awesome auction. Thanks for the reminder, John. I'll get my site up real quick here. This year we are emphasizing experiences with people and places that you love and enjoy, spreading good cheer in this way. So be sure to get to our annual auction I think I'll show it at the end, John, because I want to get to speakers as soon as possible. But John put the link up there in the chat. So if you've joined us before, you know that we encourage you to use the chat window the entire time that the speech is going on, because this is how we can communicate with each other and share ideas and meet our friends. So if you want to go ahead and post in the chat where you're calling in from, I am outside of Orlando right now, even though it looks like I'm in San Francisco. And John, apparently you're in Long Beach today.
Yes, I am. I virtually traveled to the First Congregational Church, which you'll learn a lot more about today. Also wanted to mention we have people from West Virginia, Wisconsin, Washington, Virginia, Tennessee, New York. So all over New Jersey, New Hampshire. I could keep going, but just wanted to welcome everybody from across the country today. We are looking forward to hearing your questions, and Chris and I will be taking those at the end of the program. If you have a question you wanted to ask in person, you can click the raise hand symbol, and then we'll activate your microphone so you can ask those questions for our speakers in person. So we look forward to taking those at 45 after the hour. And now I think we're going to turn it over to Allison King, who will be introducing our speakers today and today's program. So Allison, feel free to.
Yeah.
Okay,
Welcome,
there you are.
Allison. Take it away.
Thank you so much, John and Chris. Let me share my screen real fast. All right. Well, again, thank you, John and Chris, and everybody at the California Preservation Foundation for the opportunity to speak on behalf of Partners for Sacred Places today. Hello, I'm Allison King. I'm the Grants and Program Manager at Partners for Sacred Places, and we are just thrilled to be a part of the second session of the Young at Heart series. So on the docket for today, we will be introducing two upcoming grant-funded initiatives of Partners for Sacred Places. First up is the New Dollars, New Partners program, which we will be hosting for congregations in California in the spring of 2022. The second is the National Fund Grant Program, available to congregations across the country who are looking to complete a capital preservation project for their historic house of worship. We will complete today's presentation with a case study of the First Congregational Church of Long Beach, my home church, who just completed a large capital campaign and preservation project to stabilize the east facade of their historic building. That will be presented by Kara Varnell and Steve Crow, who are lay leaders at the church. So with that, I will introduce my colleague, Sarah Jones, who holds a master's in divinity at McCormick Theological Seminary, as well as a master in social service administration from the University of Chicago. She has experience with community engagement with congregations all across the country and will be helping with the New Dollars, New Partners program in the spring. Take it away, Sarah.
Thanks, Allison. So my name is Sarah Jones, and I am the Associate Director for Community Engagement at Partners for Sacred Places. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about Partners for Sacred Places, who we are, what we do, and an exciting opportunity we have for congregations in California in 2022. So a little bit about who Partners for Sacred Places is. We are a preservation organization. We were started in 1989 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and we remain the only nonprofit in the United States dedicated to the active community use and sound stewardship of historic religious properties, which basically means we help congregations be the best stewards of their buildings that they can be, both in that financial, structural sense, but also as the community assets that these places are. Over the past 30 years, we have grown into a national organization. We have staff in Philly still, but we also have staff in Chicago, which is where I am based, also in New York City, upstate New York, and Tennessee. We have done a lot of research on the place of houses of worship in their communities, and I'm going to get into a little bit of that because it's really interesting and really shapes a lot of the work that we do. First and foremost, we are a trainer. We equip congregations to preserve and use their buildings to the best of their ability. We also build with congregations to their community partners. We believe that active community use is really key to sound stewardship, and we help congregations use their buildings more actively. And we have worked with thousands and thousands of congregations across the country in a variety of different ways, through trainings, through programs, through grants, through consultancy, all of those good things. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the research that we've done that really shapes our work. In the 1990s, partners worked with the University of Pennsylvania to inventory all of the different kinds of activities that happen within a sacred place. And we wanted to do this because we found out that no one really knew all of the different kinds of things that were going on inside of churches and synagogues and mosques. I mean, we know about worship, and then we know that there's other meetings and things that happen, but who is actually using this space? Who are they serving? And what do those programs look like? And so we partnered with the University of Pennsylvania School of Social Work to inventory sacred spaces and all of the activities that happened within their buildings. And we found some very interesting and really significant findings that have really shaped the way we do work and the way we approach preservation. The most important finding that I want to highlight today is reflected in this pie chart. If we could go back really quick. And if we have one key takeaway from this portion of the presentation, I really want it to be this for y'all. We found that 81% of people who use a sacred space during the week do not worship there Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. They're not members, right? So they're coming to drop their kids off at daycare. They're coming for different meetings, for concerts, for vaccinations, to vote, and which means that these churches and synagogues and mosques are really de facto community centers in their neighborhoods. And it also means that for every congregation member served by these programs and activities and buildings, more than 4 community members are served. And so sacred places have an outsized impact in their neighborhood. We also found that 75% of congregations use their buildings to meet basic human needs, food and clothing distribution, right? Which means that these places are really vital anchors in our social safety net, even if they are informal ones. We also found that the average congregation provides more than 5,000 hours of community service per year. That's a lot of labor that people are providing to make sure that their communities are vital and that they are being a good part of their communities. And so we were working with this data, and we really used it to shape our approach to preservation and helped congregations really realize the vital role that they are playing in society and live into that. And working with congregations is great. We love doing it, but we also realized that we needed to expand that conversation and invite more people from the secular world into it. And so we wanted to try to find a way to quantify the impact that sacred places have in their neighborhoods. And for a variety of reasons, we landed on economic impact. And so in 2015 and 2016, we partnered with the University of Pennsylvania again on a study that we called the economic halo effect of sacred places. And so we looked at congregations in 3 different urban areas, Philadelphia, Chicago, and Fort Worth, to look at all of the different kinds of activities that happen within their building and the way they use their building, and actually set dollar amounts of those economic contributions, right? Everything we used is evidence-based and comes from economic research. Second key statistic that I need you to take away from today's presentation: the average urban congregation contributes over $1.7 million annually in economic contribution to its surrounding community. And that comes from a couple of different places, right? So there's direct spending, and you can see that's broken out on this pie chart here. That $1.7 million, about $500,000 comes from direct spending. So when congregations hire people, they hire locally. When they have to buy office supplies, they go to the office supply store in their neighborhood. When they do capital improvements, they are hiring local contractors, right? And so they are directly funneling money into their local communities. Many congregations also operate daycares and schools, and so they are contributing to our public education infrastructure in that way. And that's that education impact that you see there. This little red slice that you see is we call the magnet effect, and that captures the economic contributions that are made by people who are coming to this place for different reasons. So if a church hosts a wedding, you have people flying in from different parts of the country or driving in from different parts of the region, staying locally in hotels, spending money locally in restaurants, right? And maybe going shopping for themselves. Now, this is weddings, but you can also think about concerts, lectures, different kinds of programs that happen at the congregation space. They are drawing people into the neighborhood who would not be there otherwise, and those people are spending money, right? And so they do have this catalytic effect for economic impact that hadn't really been captured before. They also have a great impact in our social service infrastructure. So many congregations host community serving programs. So Alcoholics Anonymous, different kinds of AA, NA groups, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, but also clinics and counselors and other kinds of social service programs. And they are subsidizing our social safety net in that way by providing that space and providing supplies to those people. They are also participating in our safety net by giving informal services, referrals, money, counseling to people who just come in off the street or even to members of their own congregation. That has an economic impact because that has a huge impact on people's well-being in our communities. So all of that together, $1.7 million annually in economic contribution. We are wrapping up a study of this specifically for rural churches in North Carolina. We are finding a very relatively similar impact, relatively similar outsized impact, in which we are finding churches in those rural areas who may have a budget of under $100,000, but their impact is in average around $700,000, right? So again, these places matter, and they matter to more than just the congregation that worships inside of them. So Partners for Sacred Places understands that these buildings are more than just congregational assets, they are community assets. And a congregation's capacity to steward its building and take care of its building and preserve its building is directly tied to their strength of connection within the community. And so we've developed a training program that helps congregations do just that, right? Identify the role that they play in their surrounding community, tell the story of how they are having a community impact, and then building their own capacity to manage and steward their buildings, but also to draw in and recruit other investors and other support for the maintenance and preservation of those places. That signature training program is called New Dollars, New Partners for Your Sacred Place, which is the training program that we will be offering congregations in California this spring in 2022. And so in this program, congregations will be able to very much identify their impact that they are having and be able to make an effective case for their building as a community asset. And that's really, really important for fundraising and for planning in capital improvements and preservation projects. They'll calculate the dollar value of their outreach programs and community serving programs. They'll learn how to discover new community partners, and they'll learn how to maximize internal funding support and tap new resources externally to be able to fund any kinds of capital improvements that they need. And so in this program, congregations are going to go through a couple of different kind of training modules. One is making the case for your sacred place, where we help congregations really place themselves in their communities. They'll think about new community partnerships that they might want to develop, or ones that they have already that they might want to strengthen in order to increase their mission and increase their impact in their communities. They'll also go through a capital campaign primer. We found that a lot of congregations don't have a living institutional memory of capital campaign fundraising, and that they kind of start fresh each time. And so we want to make sure that they have the best tools and the best practices available, and ones that are holistic in nature and really bring in their place in the community and their role as a community asset, because they'll be able to increase their fundraising capacity that way and also increase their preservation and maintenance capacity. So I do want to talk about a couple of different congregations that have gone through this program and have seen success. The first one is from my hometown of Chicago. This is Quinn Chapel AME. Quinn Chapel is the longest living, serving Black church in Chicago. So it's a very important, very historic congregation. And they have a very massive building because at one time they had thousands and thousands of members. Pastor Moody, who you see there, came to Quinn Chapel about 20 years ago, and the congregation was quite small, around 50 members, right? And they were charged with this huge building that needed a lot of upkeep. And it seemed like a really daunting task for them. Pastor Moody attended one of our New Dollars, New Partners trainings and had this kind of aha moment that he describes, in that he realized that the congregation's stewardship of its building was directly tied to its mission in the community of the South Loop. And so Pastor Moody kind of ran with the training, and he went out and he talked to everyone in the neighborhood, right? He talked to everyone in the high rises that were around at the time. He talked to the local community serving organizations. He talked to his aldermen. He talked to the Teamsters Union, right? Like, he talks to everyone. And Quinn Chapel was able to partner with a lot of these groups to develop new kinds of community serving programs that were also aligned with the mission of the church. And so using those programs and using the impact that they were having, Quinn Chapel was able to go to the city of Chicago, the state of Illinois, and even the federal government and say, we deserve federal, state, and local dollars to maintain this building, not because it is uniquely historic, it is, but also because we are having a huge impact in this community, and we want to continue having that kind of impact in the community. And they were able to get written into like almost all of those budgets. They were also able to approach some very big funders in the Chicago area, like the McCormick Foundation, who usually don't fund brick and mortar projects, right? Especially brick and mortar projects for religious institutions. But they were able to make the case that they were having a community impact, and that their presence and their work and their like building was contributing to the community of the South Loop. And so they're kind of like just a great example of what a congregation can do with this kind of like mindset and tools. The second example I'll talk about is University Lutheran Church in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So University Lutheran is in Harvard Square, but it's actually not very big. It's not dominating in any way, but the inside of it is quite gorgeous. It is a small congregation, and they really wanted to figure out ways to improve the space and also to invite more people into the space to use it, right? And so they also went through the New Dollars, New Partners training, and they built community connections with a couple of local groups, the university, but also many other just local groups that serve the residents of Cambridge, in addition to the students and faculty who are there. And those residents were able to collaborate with the congregation to rethink and reimagine how they use that space in order to better serve the community. And so when it came time to do some renovations in that space, not only did they have a wide network of supporters, but they were also able to work with their community partners to make designs, like architectural designs, that would both be true to the original design and preserve its very beautiful space, but also make it more accessible and make it more conducive to the kinds of community programs that they wanted to have in that space. And so we are going to be offering this training program, like I said, to congregations in California in the spring. And we are doing this with some generous support from the Lilly Foundation. And we want to be able to open this up to any and all congregations that are looking to maintain and steward their buildings and are looking to build their capacity to do that. We're going to be talking a little bit more in depth and more details about what that training will entail, the timeline of that training, and what congregations will need to prepare in order to register for that. And that's going to be on Wednesday, February 9th at 12 p.m. Pacific time. And you can reach out to myself or to Allison with any questions about that, and you should be getting some more information about it as well. And you can always also reach out to myself and Allison with any questions about Partners for Sacred Places or the work that we do. I know not all of you are in California, but we still want to hear from you, and we would still love to work with you. And I'll turn it back over to Allison to talk about a another great opportunity from partners, the National Fund for Sacred Places.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Hi, everyone. Again, I'm Allison, the Grants and Program Manager at Partners for Sacred Places, and I'm here today to introduce you to the National Fund for Sacred Places, a grant program dedicated to the preservation of vibrant historic houses of worship. So the National Fund program is a collaboration between Partners for Sacred Places and the National Trust for Historic Preservation. As Sarah discussed earlier, sacred places function as valuable sacred public spaces. Many of these aging and architecturally complex facilities require increasingly diverse funding streams to be sustainable community centers in the 21st century. The National Fund was born out of that belief that technical and financial support could build the capacity of congregations and increase the stability of these critical yet disappearing historic community centers. The National Fund launched in 2016 with a $14 million grant from the Indiana-based Lilly Endowment. And since then, we have awarded millions of dollars of capital grants and provided technical support to 82 community-serving congregations across the country. The National Fund team consists of staff from Partners for Sacred Places and the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Some of our partners from the National Trust are on this call today, so I would like to be sure to acknowledge their contributions towards making this program possible. We are also crediting our advisory committee made up of clergy, academic thought leaders, and preservation professionals who help guide our grant-making decisions. So we'd like to acknowledge their ongoing support of the National Fund program. So what does the program entail? It has a few different components. The National Fund provides online training where staff from Partners for Sacred Places and the National Trust meet with clergy and lay leaders from each of the congregations to lay down a baseline of knowledge to help launch their capital projects and capital campaigns. After the training, staff meet with each of the participants to determine which piece of technical assistance would best serve their project needs and timeline. The non-matching $5,000 planning grants are available to participants upon program entry and can be used towards any project or campaign-related planning expense. The meat and potatoes, and last but not least, the National Fund provides capital grants of $50,000 to $250,000 to congregations looking to preserve their buildings and increase community use of underutilized spaces. A typical program timeline takes between 18 to 24 months. Awardees will be announced in October of next year. The training will take place in November. The planning grants are used again in the earlier phases of the project, so by September of 2023. Folks must submit the information for their capital grant by March 2024 at the latest, and I'll go into more details about what that means later. And again, projects must be completed within that 18 to 24 month window. So the training that we offer to each of the participants invited into the National Fund program offers an introduction to the National Fund and what it offers. We cover best practices for capital preservation project planning. We introduce folks to different ways of leveraging the public value of their sacred place to reach out to other community members and institutions and organizations to help fundraise for their projects. And we give everybody an opportunity to mix and mingle with one another and learn best practices from their peers who are in similar situations in congregations all across the country. We offer a menu of technical assistance to each of the congregations who pick one of these services that best fits their project. We offer in-depth case statement review to make sure that folks are speaking to the audiences that they're hoping to reach, setting the right tone and positioning themselves well to tell a compelling story of their congregation. We offer economic halo impact studies, as Sarah mentioned earlier, that helps congregations build the civic value and civic profile of their sacred place and give numbers to bolster that case for support. We also offer community engagement assistance, which can take the form of an asset mapping, having partners facilitate meetings with local institutions and stakeholders, or running an open house. The National Trust has a preservation architect on staff who helps with professional services. This again can vary from helping congregations craft requests for proposals, identifying, vetting qualified preservation professionals, and reviewing contracts, assessments, and reports that are offered by various professionals we're looking to support congregations as they embark on their capital projects. We also offer fundraising consulting assistance to congregations in the program. This is provided by Gianfranco Grande, who's Partners Executive Vice President. He offers feedback and support as congregations plan and strategize for how they reach out to different congregation members, both internally, externally, and for other organizations they are looking to partner with. The planning grants are available to congregations once they're entered into the program. They can be used for conditions assessments, mechanical assessments. They can be used towards professional campaign and marketing related costs, such as campaign videos, website development, and things like that. And again, we ask that folks, use these early on in their project planning process, so by September of 2023. The National Fund is different than a lot of capital grant programs in that the grant award is actually not dispersed from the outset. We have a matching fund challenge, and we ask that congregations achieve 2 benchmarks before accessing the first half of the funds. So those 2 benchmarks, again, met once folks are already in the program, are a quarter of the matching funds raised as either pledged or in hand, and permit-ready architectural documentation that describes the entire scope of work for the National Fund. Again, these are benchmarks that folks must achieve once they're in the program, and we offer training and technical assistance to help each congregation meet these benchmarks successfully. The other half of the grant award is dispersed once the National Fund scope of work is completed. This may or may not correspond to the end of the entire project. Sometimes the National Fund scope of work is a portion or an earlier phase of a larger project, and that second half can be dispersed again once the National Fund scope of work is completed, rather than the entire project. But work cannot begin on the National Fund scope of work until we've looked at, all of the permit-ready documents and the fundraising plan and the other steps in the capital grant submission stage. The National Fund does not support work that has already begun or has recently wrapped up. So it really helps congregations who are in the planning process and getting these large capital projects underway. A bit more information about the matching fund requirement. Our matching challenge is designed to incentivize congregations to utilize what they learn in the training to expand their network of stakeholders and build a sustainable donor base that they can continue to reach out to support their communities well into the future. Each congregation must match our grant dollars with new monies raised after program entry or October of 2022. For grants of $50,000 to $100,000, it's a 1-to-1 match. And for grants of $100,000 to $250,000, it's a 2-to-1 match. So the congregation is responsible for raising $2 for every dollar that we donate. Eligible matching funds, again, must be solicited, received, or pledged after program entry, but they can come from a variety of different sources, including individual donations, grants from governments or organizations, events, in-kind gifts and services, and the like. A full list can be found on our website, fundforsacredplaces.org, in our eligibility guidelines. Projects that we support can, again, vary depending on the size and complexity of the buildings. Eligible projects include structural stabilization, envelope repairs, making the building watertight, upgrading the mechanical and electrical systems that help keep the building functioning, life safety and fire code upgrades, and ADA accessibility projects. Ineligible projects include property acquisition, new additions, except for in the cases of accessibility, demolition, landscaping, cemeteries, pipe organ repairs, and furnitures, and that does include pew cushions. I get that question a lot. If your congregation or a congregation that you know is interested in applying, here's what the application timeline will look like for 2022. We will be opening up the letter of intent on our grants management system, Foundant, on January 18th. The National Fund has a 2-step application process. So the letter of intent is a short form intended to give us an idea of what the congregation is and what they're doing and how they intend to fund the work. If their LOI is successful, they are invited to complete a full application, which is a more in-depth form that helps us dive deeper into the details of a project, lets us get to know the congregation a little bit better and their intentions. This last year, we had 300 letters of intent submitted through our online grants management system. we were able to invite 30 congregations to complete a full application, and we were able to fund 15 projects this year. And again, the list can be found on our website, fundforsacredplaces.org. So the overall timeline of the two-step application, we open up the letter of intent on January 18th. We'll be hosting a webinar to answer all your questions about the grant program and the application process on January 26th at 12 p.m. Eastern, so 9 a.m. Pacific. And the letters of intent will be due at midnight, March 7th, Hawaii Standard Time. So folks on the mainland get a little bit more time if they choose to stay up that late, but hopefully folks aren't crunching that close to the deadline. We will be notifying folks if they're invited to complete a full application in June, and the full application will be due in mid-July on July 18th. We'll be notifying congregations if they're accepted into the National Fund Program in October of 2022. We evaluate applications based off of 6 criteria, and they are all equally important. No one is weighted higher than the other. We look for congregations that embody architectural or cultural significance. Sacred places do not have to be formally nominated to any historic register to qualify for our grant, but there should be a case for eligibility based off of the National Register criteria, which you can find on their website. We look that congregations have urgent capital needs that stretch beyond the typical capacity of a congregation. And we look to see that folks have taken a holistic examination of their building, they're working towards solidifying their priorities and needs, and that they have the capacity to manage a large capital project. We look for congregations that are also ready to hit the ground running with fundraising, both from within and outside the membership. These vital congregations must be community-minded and have a demonstrated interest in service to both members and non-members. We look for healthy congregations that have stable leadership, strong partnerships, and at the very least, a stable, if not growing, congregational membership. And last but not least is the completion and the completeness of the application submitted. We ask that folks put their best foot forward and give us clear, well-written, and complete applications to give us a good sense of what everybody is up to. As I mentioned, we will be hosting a more in-depth webinar to go further detail about the evaluation criteria and the timeline on January 6th at 9 a.m. Pacific. You can find more information about the grant program at our website, Fund for Sacred Places. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, and my email is here, aking@sacredplaces.org. And with that, I will turn the spotlight over to Kara Varnell and Steve Crow to talk about their experience with the First Congregational Church of Long Beach, a grantee of the National Fund and recent winner of the California Preservation Design Awards for craftsmanship and preservation technology. They are also long-standing friends of mine. As I mentioned, Long Beach is my home church, and I'm just thrilled to introduce them and the congregation. With that, take it away, Kara and Steve.
Well, hello, everyone. I wanted to thank Allison and Sarah and the folks at CPF for asking us to share our experience with our amazing project that, for those of us on the Historic Building Preservation Committee, turned out to have a very steep learning curve. So I'm going to begin with giving you a quick overview of the building's history. Do we have a photo of the church? Perfect. We can just leave that up there for a moment. The church was designed by H.M. Patterson, who had done several churches throughout Southern California and the West. It was built in 1914 with local labor and a combination of local and imported to California materials. Contemporary references in the local papers declared it to be the first brick and terracotta Italian Romanesque revival building west of the Mississippi and the largest church in California at the time. I've never checked on the absolute veracity of those statements, but from what I casually observed, I think it may be true for Southern California. Within the city of Long Beach, it is completely unique. It has this beautiful patterned brickwork. You can't really see too well, perhaps, in that photo, but the tower, the center part of the tower is tapestry brick, and it's beautiful. And there are all the terracotta decorative details, and then our stained glass, our 17-foot stained glass rose windows. There are 3 of them. You see 2 here, and then there's in the photo, the picture on the left side of the photo, that is east facing, and then we have north facing rose window, and then one that you can't see, which is west facing. And that one is not quite as decorative because it goes over the roof line, and it's hidden from view. So it is the oldest public building in the city of Long Beach, still functioning, still fulfilling the function for which it was intended. It's still a church, and it has the same congregation now as it did when the Bixby family founded it. The Bixby family was one of the founding families here in Long Beach. Just as an interesting aside, there were discoveries made during the preservation process that exposed just how unfamiliar the builders were with some of the materials. In 1933, there was a major earthquake which caused quite a lot of damage to the north facade, and compromises were made in the rebuilding to the decorative elements, which you can see in the photo there on that north facade. It doesn't have all the same corbelling as the east facade. I presume they did that just because it was easier, but the building had collapsed around the window. It didn't actually, the window was left intact, thankfully. Long Beach had another earthquake in the 70s, and then this led to the retrofit that was finished in 1988. In the mid 70s, also the building was placed on the Long Beach landmark listing. By the early 2000s, the effects of nearly 100 years of salty sea air and port pollution was taking its toll. And it was clear that we needed an overall preservation program. For those that don't know, Long Beach has one of the largest ports in the world, and First Church is a stone's throw from the beach, and thus very close to the port and all the pollution that it offers. So we decided that this first step was getting the building on the National Register of Historic Places, which would give us a certain standing. We did this in 2012. What was interesting about doing that process is that it helped us understand the building in detail. And because you have to describe it in detail, I actually wrote the building's description, and I did it in 15 pages, which they made me cut down to 7. But it was a good way to really become familiar with all of the aspects and really fall in love with this building. Then we started down the path, the very unfamiliar path of building preservation. Now, I am a conservator, I'm an art conservator, and so I know well the process of examining an object and describing it in just mind-numbing detail. And also, I know about having to describe the condition of things. But what I do has nothing to do with architectural conservation. So it was really way out of my comfort zone, way out of my field. So we hired, our very first advisor was a architectural conservator named David Arbogast, who was from Iowa, who taught, he had a course in teaching historic writing, how to write a historic structures report, which is an important thing to do because that, I mean, I wrote the description of the building's exterior, but we needed to have a better understanding of the overall, the internal workings of the building and think of the building holistically. He came out to teach us how to do that. But before he left, he did a cursory examination of the building, and his concerns ignited a sense of urgency in us. We had collapsing terracotta columns and broken terracotta blocks at street level, which we could see, but he could see and really understand better the cracks that were forming around the rose windows. So that urgency led us to try to find the first preservation person we could, because we needed to get on this. And there was a contractor locally who did preservation work, and he came in and he was very helpful, but his limited experience, the best he could do is to provide us with a number so we could start a capital campaign. That was the idea, that we would raise the money and enough money and then do the work, because that is sensible. anyway, we went, excuse me a second, our concerns about the window pushed us a little bit ahead of things, and we decided to apply for our first grant through a local foundation, which is the Long Beach Navy Memorial Fund. And we were awarded $50,000, and then we started with the window because we didn't want the window, something terrible happening to the window as we were raising money for everything else, since we had no idea what we were doing. Down the road, we found out we should have waited because starting with the window was perhaps not the smartest thing to do. We had run a capital campaign, and the congregation came up with a little bit more than $1 million. And we thought we would be able to do for that, based on what our contractor had said, we should be able to do the east facade and the north facade. We were so naive. They're just not words for how naive we were. We were lucky enough at some point soon, lucky enough actually, that Allison met John Fiddler and connected us with John Fiddler. And for those that don't know him, he is a world-renowned historic preservation architectural conservator, and he was great. And with him, we had somebody to actually put us on hold and get us to talk through our plan, and we actually came up with a better plan. And he started by educating the entire congregation on historic preservation and best practices, so we all had the same language. Before I turn this over to Steve, who will give you more details, I thought I would just share with you some of the lessons learned. First, if there was ever a project that proves you need the right people from the outset, this was it. Our project of $1 million for both facades turned out to be half of what we needed for one. The total cost for both facades will be closer to $4.5 to $5 million, which, when you think about it, it makes sense, but we didn't know. We needed John Fiddler. We needed that person who really had the knowledge to help us do this. And without Allison connecting us to him, it wouldn't have happened. I don't know what we would have done, actually. But the other point is how important it is to have one person dedicated from the very beginning to get this thing started, because unless you have some knowledge within your congregation or within whatever project you're doing, unless you've got people that really know what's going on, there's a lot to learn, and there are a lot of pitfalls. And with that, we had Allison, who was just out of college, and she ran with this, and it was incredible. So she knew the congregation, she knew John Fiddler, and it was quite necessary. The other part of it is, I think, having that person help you come up with the real cost is one thing, but then you have to figure out how you're going to raise the money. And we had incredible support from partners, and it had nothing to do, well, it may have had something to do with Allison, but it wasn't driven by Allison. We did apply, we were accepted, and we needed their support, because this is daunting when you're looking at a project that is run basically by volunteers and needing to come up with millions of dollars, which I will now turn it over to Steve, who can share more details with you, but that is the background. Go ahead, Steve.
And she's turning it over to me because I'm the treasurer of the church and therefore signed off on all the checks that were written during this project. I will add one other aspect to our speed. And that was that the neighborhood in which we were sitting was changing very dramatically. And across the street from us, even as we were concerned about our window, across the street from us, blocks of new apartment buildings were going up, and heavy construction was taking place. And big trucks were coming up and down the street. And at times the whole building sort of shook. And we were deeply concerned that if we didn't get busy with this, more damage will be done. And moreover, just a block away right now, the 11-story City Hall is being torn down and more construction will be going there. So our neighborhood is under major renovation. It's both threatened the building, but it's also an opportunity for us to make our building truly part of that. Am I actually on video now? Just let me know because I'm not seeing myself.
Yes,
You're on
you're
video, Steve.
you're on.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So what we learned was even with all of John Fiddler's invaluable assistance, the way this building was constructed in 1914, and we did have architectural plans, but we didn't have the kind of detailed plans around the window and the terracotta that we really needed. We thought we were going to discover that there was a rusting metal infrastructure that needed to be replaced, and we could take it out, take off the damaged terracotta, order the new, put in a new metal structure, put it all back together. And that's essentially what we ended up having to do. We had to design, construct, and install a big stainless steel armature that gave us what we needed to go around the window and to install all the new terracotta. But making it fit to the building and fit to the whole was unique because the building had in fact settled. I can still remember the day Fiddler said, you know, that window isn't really round now, it's a little oblong. And so some of the early designs based on what we thought we were going to confront in designing both the infrastructure for the metal infrastructure and the terracotta all had to be redone. An early order went in for the creation of some of the terracotta pieces. We had to redo that order because it turned out that almost everyone had to be individually designed to be able to fit. We also discovered, and I think our contractor actually knew this was going to happen, but we didn't, that the old structure was put together using lots of materials that were now considered potentially hazardous. And so it seemed to me that step after step, we had to call in a company to check for potential hazardous material, and they found it. And then we had to hire a hazmat company to remove it all. That added about $60,000 to $70,000 to our overall work by the time it was all done. Originally, we had hoped to attend to all the brick on the east facade because of spalling and because of issues with the mortar. We took that out of the project once we saw what the pricing might be. It was through partners that we were able to make that a subsidiary project to the total project and to use funds gained from partners to return that work on the patterned brickwork back into our work for the east facade. The last thing, well, not the last thing, but the last big thing that we didn't plan on was we were going to put new sills under each of the tower windows that we had included within where the scaffolding was. And when we got ready to do that, we discovered that the frames were in such bad shape that all of them had to be removed, all the glass in them had to be repaired, and new frames built and installed. And again, thanks to the extra funding in the grant program, we were able to absorb an unexpected $150,000 onto our bigger project that we had started before we connected fully with partners. So we learned a lot about construction in 1914 and its durability over a century of being in Long Beach. But we had no idea we would face COVID. With the damaged terracotta removed, the new armature designed and ready to be moved to Long Beach and put together and installed, and the terracotta arriving almost daily, COVID hit. Everything stopped. Our San Francisco contractor-based crew went home. And while Long Beach would have allowed work to begin again, Rules in San Francisco prevented it. We had nothing done on the project for almost 5 months. COVID-related expenses mounted. For example, the contractor had leased a house that his staff would move in and out of during the week. Scaffolding costs increased, a few permits had to be changed, and so forth. So how did we finally get this done? Well, we've already mentioned partners, and partners were critical to allow us to actually do this work in the way that we had originally hoped before we started to run into the problems, at least on the east facade. They allowed us to extend our basic work into tasks that we knew needed to be done, but we weren't sure we could afford. The Navy Memorial Heritage Association gave us 2 more $50,000 grants. We discovered we had a small parking lot that we had not really been using, and in the market it sold for $500,000, and the church agreed to put all of that against the cost of the building, and it allowed us to match what partners would give us. Giacomelli and Courtney and Fiddler swallowed some costs, and Fiddler worked the construction contract very closely and very carefully. Nonetheless, we tapped our line of credit and had to turn the total draw of it into a mortgage of $1.1 million. We had anticipated that we might come up as much as $500,000 short. We came up almost double that short. And now we're striving to find funds to diminish the size of our monthly payments, trying to get it paid down so before we have to integrate it into our operating budget. We're proud of this project, even as we face the fact that in a few years, we will need to do much of the same work on the north facade. Thanks to Fiddler's advice and oversight, we followed best practices in historic building preservation, and the quality of our efforts is gaining professional recognition. We won a commendation from the Victorian Society of America in 2021. ICON, the Institute of Conservation in the United Kingdom, awarded the work a 2021 Williams Prize. And as already mentioned, the California Preservation Foundation gave us the 2021 Design Award for Craftsmanship in Preservation Technology. And we're proud of what was finished, we're proud of what we did, and we're very proud that it's being recognized for the quality of work. Thank you very much. We're ready for questions.
Thank you very
There
much.
we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.
Let me just get my screen straight here. I thought that was fascinating because I had no idea. Some of the figures that you cite were just incredible. I posted a couple in the chat, so maybe refresh my memory, but 81%, Sarah, you said 81% of people who use the facilities are not necessarily in the congregation. Is that right?
Yeah, so according to that original study, Sacred Places at Risk, we found that 81% of people who are using the Sacred Place are not congregation members. With the HALO study, we did get a little bit of an updated figure for that, and it's now about 87%, which doesn't really surprise anyone, but it is going up.
I lost my notes. What do you call it? The economic halo? I thought that was so
Yeah,
clever.
the economic halo effect of Sacred Places.
So I think that that's a very compelling way for somebody who is either owns the church or the church building or is in charge of stewarding said church building and congregation to make this argument that they have a much more economic potential if that building remains in service. And I know in my travels, like I've gone to a lot of larger cities and many of the church buildings are not being utilized anymore because the congregations have moved out. Do you see this in your experience? Abandoned basically churches or for sale churches?
We do see that a lot, and we see our work as helping congregations extend their lives as long as they can through different kinds of stewardship practices as well. And we are starting to work with congregations who are thinking about transitioning their buildings because we also believe that, like, in order to best preserve the church building or the synagogue building itself, it's really vital for the congregation to have a very a primary voice in that transition process and determine what it will be used for.
All right. I don't see any questions inside the Q&A. Were you going to say something, Stephen?
No.
I had something to touch on Sarah's comment.
Okay.
We're going to be publishing a guide for congregations who are thinking of transitioning their buildings, and that'll be available on our website, sacredplaces.org. So if a congregation in your community is thinking about, transitioning their building, we have a guide that goes from everything of finding space sharing partners to help supplement the rent and some of the costs to, if you are looking for a sale, how do you want to do that thoughtfully and with consideration?
I think it's a very complicated situation, trying to
We
lost
lost.
Chris. I did see one question in the chat. Oh, go ahead, Kara.
I was just going to share that as I said, I'm a conservator, and I'm a conservator in private practice. And last year I moved my studio to a historic church here in Long Beach. I was up in LA, and it was Allison putting the thought in my head that Partners was trying to encourage churches to rent their spaces to nonprofit arts organizations. So I don't exactly fall into that category, but it seemed like it would be possible. And as it turned out, they were very grateful to have me in here. So, and I feel very safe. And